Great, thanks. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be here in this beautiful city. I haven't been here for 20 years, and now I certainly have to come back very soon. Amazing place you live. I'm very envious. My office is in Copenhagen, Denmark, and as you can see here, this is Germany and this is Sweden. It's a very small peninsula here, and Copenhagen is on this island just across the water from Sweden. We mainly work in Denmark and Sweden also, and we've been working a little bit in Germany as well. But this is mainly the office is working with different subjects. You could say we've been working very much with culture and education for children and youth, and now we're moving into larger buildings also. So we work quite a lot with work spaces and workplaces, and we also work with education on higher education, like university and high schools. This is the office. Maybe I should. Can you hear me? Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. This is the office. It's in Vesterbro in the center of Copenhagen, and right now we are actually expanding. So we are 35 people. And we'll expand, I think, the next half year a little bit more, up to maybe 40 people. So the way we work very much is trying to open up to every opportunity that you could find or potential at the site. So we work very much with analysis in the first place, try to keep an open mind, and then we usually make at least 2 or 3 different concepts, and then we test them against the different parameters or the analysis that we have done in the beginning. And the testing is very much done in an analog way with models, because it's so easy for everybody to attend. We work in teams, and being able to attend and to work with an analog model is easy for everybody. If you work in a 3D model, there's only one person controlling the computer, and so we believe that this is the way to start up, and then we test everything in 3D afterwards. And of course we work with Revit and so forth when you get into the project drawings. It's a little slow, I think the pictures are heavy. So this is the model shop, and always quite a busy place to be. This is Copenhagen, which is very different, I think, from Prague. It's all about water. It's very flat. You don't have any topography whatsoever, but just very few hills. And the harbor is very present. You have to cross the harbor all the time when you're going from one part to the other in the city. And I think Tina Sorby is going to come here, my friend and colleague, and I think she's going to tell you a lot about Copenhagen and the architecture politics of Copenhagen. So I'm not going to mention too much about that. But the water, and I think and the daylight is part of the Scandinavian background that I've worked from, which is also very much about keeping the daylight in a subtle way in the building. Since we don't have much daylight in winter time, it's a very important issue in everything we do. Another thing that's an important thing to us in the office is always to give something back to the city. So one of the main points when we do projects is how do we connect to the city or to the surroundings, the context, and are we actually able to give something back when you do a building? Is there a public space that you can relate to, or is there at least an inner public space where you could connect to the context? So that is part of the way we work. We also work very much with the sculptural qualities of the buildings. So going across the water, we did a few years ago a small kindergarten on the beach in a place called KRUH, which is a protected area. There was a small building site somehow was we were able to build a small building here, and the municipality wanted an extension to their school, which is a preschool for smaller children, on this amazing beach. This is the water out here and a beach, an existing old school, and then you have the whole city here, which is an old fishing village, now full of very resourceful people, not very happy that you should build on their beach. So the idea was to merge the fishing village, which is very much about protecting against the wind, which is primarily from the west, from the water. So it's extremely windy on this beach most of the year. So the whole fishing village is constructed to create calm spaces in between the buildings. So the idea was to merge that with the dunes of the landscape, and by doing that somehow creating a new landscape, but also to create a space where the city dwellers could watch the sunset, so you could walk across the building. That was actually later not done because they were afraid that there would be some kind of responsibility if people would fall off the roof. So it's not actually effectuated, but that was the main point, and that is the main point in many of the buildings that we do is if you can create another public space, it would be great because you're taking away some space on this public beach. So the idea is mainly just to have the fishing houses as wooden construction to carry the roof, and then you have the dunes connecting the huts in between. And this is how it looks like, with these small huts here and the dunes. Everything is clad in wood. In Rubinia, I think it's actually coming from Central Europe. Very sustainable, one of the very nice sustainable woods that you have in Europe, which is as hard as teak. You could say, and have the same qualities. This is in the daily. This is going to be taken away. This is just to protect the new landscape that we did around the building. And here you have the beach and the building inside. So creating spaces behind the building, protected from the wind, to make a playground was part of the scheme also. And as you can see here, you cannot move on top of the roof, but you can sit in the ends and you can watch the sun set and also to rise. And the wooden cladding. We like to work with just one material, roof and facade in one material, because then you can work very sculpturally with the buildings, and you don't have to differ between different elements like facade and roof. So that is part of our design brief, I think. If you could go up to the roof, and I think a lot of people do actually, even though they're not allowed, you have this wonderful view across Øresund, which is the strait between Denmark and Sweden. And inside you have these huts, and they're used as shelves and storage spaces, and you have this possibility of somehow creating an intimate space and still having transparency between the different bays. I don't think the children care that much about the view, but it is quite extraordinary. Of course, using all the space that is one of the resources that you have, and creating these spaces for children where they can actually hide and be away from the grown-ups is part of what we do when we do kindergartens. This is another small kindergarten done quite a long time ago, but this is also about trying to use the potential that you have. Or what we discuss very much is that it's always a positive thing that you have obstacles, that there's something in your way, and that you can always turn that into a positive thing. So trying to to reconsider every time you have a new obstacle would make you able to somehow create new ways of, or new thinking, rethinking of the program. This is a small kindergarten in an area of Copenhagen that's kind of quite broken up. You have the old Copenhagen blocks that are always open to the inside and has a kind of common space where you have green spaces inside, and a more sort of official outside facade towards the street. So it's private and public. And this place was broken up in this corner, and there was a site, there was a gas station, and they wanted to make a kindergarten that was only in 1 story, even though the rest was in 5 or 6 stories. And the program was too big for the site, since you need outdoor area, which is as big as the built area, to make a kindergarten. So the idea here is mainly to not use the money on cleaning up the site, but sealing it, and to take care of the fire regulations, which means that you could not build anything, or you could not have windows towards the inner courtyard here or towards the gables in the end. So withdrawing here 5 meters would create a space for windows and outdoor space, and then of course taking care of the neighbors so their daylight is not taken from the inner courtyard, which is already quite dense, as you can see. So sealing the contamination and making a new surface, and working thoroughly with the daylight and the sun into the back courtyard here, and then creating a new outdoor area on the roof, cutting out for sun and daylight, and also, as you can see here, out here and here, and folding this surface down so you have an access for the roof or the play area directly for the kids, so you have a more natural movement towards the roof where the main play area is. And this is how the idea was. So it's kind of strange to have this 1-story building in a 5-story context. So it's a little bit a spaceship. But the roof up here is used by the neighbors in the back, so they have a staircase coming up to the roof, so they can use the roof and have more sunlight in the evening. In midsummer, the sun is coming down 9:30, 10 o'clock. So by giving this roof back to the neighbors in the evening, they can actually have much more sunlight and enjoy that in the summertime. And here's it's more like a hill, you could say, that the children can walk on and come up to the roof. And by adding beanbags on this hill and adding umbrellas to the beanbags, you can have different situations here. You could have a play area, but you could also have an audience if things are going on down here. You can have small theatre plays and so forth. So again, it's about using the same space in many different ways. Entrance area, and of course by making this very transparent in a polyester textile, you could also get more daylight into the backspace for the neighbors. And all of the bays connected directly to outdoor space, so you could run in and out during the day. Here's the beanbags on a rainy day. They're actually really fun. They're placed so you cannot hurt yourself. You cannot roll very far. You'll land in a beanbag, which is of course a lot of fun to do by purpose. And one outdoor area. This is artificial grass. It's actually not natural because we cannot go down to the contamination. I'm protecting a little bit against the street, which is a busy street, so you don't want to have everybody just to be able to look into the space. Yeah, I think it's slow.
Oh, no.
Right? Yeah. We do quite a lot of transformation and conversion, adaptive reuse. And so it's actually one of our specialities. This is a extension, but also restoration of a listed building by Arne Jacobsen from 1956, a modernist building. Arne Jacobsen is kind of the modernist hero in Denmark, and his work is very important to us. So there was this is the 1956 era photo, and this was at the time in '56. It was really progressive school. It was one of the first schools in Denmark where you would have a scale that was in the children's scale. It was more like being at home. So every little classroom is like a small house, and you share a small courtyard together with your neighbor classroom, and that is the kind of system that go all the way through. Here you have auditorium and offices and so forth, and back here you would have all these specialized rooms like chemistry and physics and biology and so forth on the school kitchen. So very sort of rational, very systematic. But with the new school laws in Denmark, this was not sufficient to support new ways of learning, which is much more about project oriented learning. It's much more about individual learning as well, small groups, larger groups. So just having this classroom was not really enough. You needed some supplementary rooms, and you needed to be able to have two classes at once, and being able to divide them in different groups and so forth. So there was a very large and very sort of public discussion on were you able to change the school, or should it be a museum? And there were another team of architects trying to work with this construction, to make diagonal movements and so forth through the school, but in the end the cultural minister actually vetoed against it. So when we came in, it was kind of in a vacuum. You could say we started on scratch. So this is a famous section of the classroom where you have the daylight coming all the way in, but you still have a very cozy and very intimate scale in the classroom, and the direct connection to this small project. It's actually really a beautiful work, modernist work. And this schoolyard. So I think a lot of the work that we do is all about trying to understand the different interests that you have involved in a building site, or with a building, or with changing a building. And you have, of course, on one side the parents and the teachers, and on the other side the cultural heritage department, and on the third side the municipality who's going to pay for this. So trying to understand the different interests and making it into potentials is part of what we think we're really good at doing. And so it's all about dialogue, and trying to make the sketches and the solutions all along the way. You have the dialogue, and sometimes something new will turn up. And here what we did was to suggest that you could use the courtyard underneath the ground, since it's not listed anymore, and to make a supplementary space underneath here, and then do the restoration of the existing school. And by doing that, and only making small changes, you could keep the school in function and still supply for new ways of learning. So this is the suggestion: is going underground, getting all the specialized spaces like physics and chemistry and so forth down underground, and by doing that you could facilitate the new ventilation systems and so forth without spoiling Arne Jacobsen's school, and then making this very large space here where you have light supplied by these courtyards that you can also walk into, and then connecting everything to the existing school. So you have this space that you could enter from all the hallways and use it as a project space and so forth. And as you can see up here, you have the Arne Jacobsen sort of classicist proportions. It's half a courtyard that we used here. We also used the detailing that he did. And then by going underground, you can twist the geometry, and by doing that, you can have a totally different spatial connection, which is supplying another space or parallel to the existing very sort of rigid spaces. So this is the plan. All the staircases here used also a small auditorium, so you have an open space and a learning situation around the staircases, and then you have the specialized spaces here, laboratories and so forth, and then the space in between is used for project work. And of course, going underground, you don't want to have a feeling of being in a basement, so the whole detailing and understanding of the space down here and the daylight again was a main focus of the work. Model work tested in a daylight laboratory and building site. The old school was energy renovated and so forth. I mean, you can't see that hopefully, but then we changed the program inside and used the old assembly hall as a new media center to gain a new heart in the school. And by adding this reversible furniture, you could facilitate it. Arne Jacobsen made a series of chairs and tables for the school that unfortunately was sold before the building was listed, and there was only a few left. We were painting these in. This is the Arne Jacobsen color scheme for the school's kind of bold colors and so forth, and then we added this furniture. You want to keep the old. There's a stage in this room, so we wanted to be able to facilitate that. So when you use the stage, you can sit on these stairs and use them as a seating area. And of course, you also wanted to keep this double height space here. So and again, keeping intimate space for reading and so forth. So we did this Harry Potter furniture where you could change spaces within, and you could still keep the feeling of having a large space. This is just a curious thing in that there was no toilets inside. This is the 50s, you're going outside into the courtyard, and new demands for toilets. So this is the existing building here, and we dug out these for new toilets, and making a homage to Arne Jacobsen by using his wallpaper, rescaled, of course, on the floor. So this is the courtyards in the old schoolyard, sort of subtle on the ground, and then getting much more expressive and much more dynamic when you go underground. These courtyards, you can enter by these doors, and you can use them for different experiments and projects that you would do down in the parterre. And as you can see, the daylight situation is pretty good, mainly by, of course, having the courtyards here getting daylight in, but also by being very eager to have the bright surfaces. So you have this white concrete and white ceilings made of textile, and of course acoustic walls that are also white, so you reflect the most daylight as possible. And the main construction and secondary construction looking up towards Arne Jacobsen. And here you have the small auditoriums, so that the children would sit here, and you have a teacher standing down here teaching in kind of short intervals. And project work. This is the physics room, so you'll get the kind of concentrated teaching in here and experiments and so forth, and then you would go out and work in the project space in groups or alone. Sort of heavy furniture in the Arne Jacobsen colors, and suppled by a few of ours as well. School kitchen or open kitchen, you could say, where everybody can come and make and bake and make food during the day. Yeah, a learning situation as well. This is a mixed-use building that we did a few years ago. It's kind of public and kind of private. It's subsidized housing on top. And down here there's after-school facilities, and you have a water tank up here that's still in use. So you get the water down into through the building. And by adding these new bays, we managed to also make it furnishable for young people's housing. The site is really in the middle of a motorway and a railroad. It's kind of not a very attractive site, but it has a really nice view, but very noisy, you could say. So we had to take care of the noise situation as well. And since it's a landmark, you can see from far away, it's important to us to keep it in a quite large scale, and to not to have this kind of more domestic scale into its 35 housing units. The plan is not really great for furnishing since it's only 28 square meters. So the main idea here is to, by adding these bays, one is triangular, one is not, and by adding these small functional units into the small apartments, you could facilitate all practical things, but still have a kind of decent space that you can live in. And of course, daylight again is important, and view. Here's the plan. There's two different parts. One is more triangular. One is more square, with a small bathroom, a small kitchen, a small wardrobe, and a small workspace, and a bed on top of that. And this is the main concept for the apartment. By using prefab as much as we could and craning it up, we could also do it quite cheaply. Subsidized housing is not the greatest budget, so we had to really prioritize. And trying to keep the detail as abstract as possible. When you get close, of course, there's a lot of cheating and gluing together glass and so forth to keep these kind of large-scale windows that we could actually not really afford. And here's the view. And the functional unit, the workspace, and the kitchen. Another adaptive reuse that we opened recently, a year ago, is in Copenhagen. Copenhagen has grown recently after the fortification of Copenhagen fell, which is actually not until 1869, I think it was. And you gave out the demarcation areas for buildings. So suddenly, outside Copenhagen, these bridges, Vesterbro, and Nørrebro grew up very fast, and a lot of things were kind of suddenly the whole area changed from being open areas to city areas. But this place, which is a KRUH, it's a place where you would come with your car or horse car from the city and out here, and you'll have a nice afternoon and go back to the city. Suddenly, this was enclosed by the new buildings, and quite soon you couldn't see this place. It was kind of inside a backyard, and nobody actually knew about it. And for a long time, it was used for different activities, like there was a variety, and this is kind of a discotheque place where in the 70s, and then after a while it closed down. So it's been empty for almost 35 years, and kind of forgotten. And there was this foundation that found it and thought it would be nice to try to re-establish this history of Copenhagen and how Copenhagen has actually grew up and around this space. So this is how we found it. There was a new building attached to the old building here, and was totally, enclosed into this courtyard. And this is how we ended up by stripping down the old building and renovating the whole hall and reusing it as a conference center for Danish lawyers. It was actually, we were able to to re-establish the house. But it was actually a quite bad state, as you can see here. And of course, it's only because of this foundation that put money into it that it's feasible. It's not really economically sound, you could say, but it's part of the foundation's idea of keeping the history of Copenhagen. So we had to redo most of the house, to be honest, and this wall was falling out. The pillars were not sound, so we had to take them down. So in the end, the idea was not to re-establish what was there, but to have the space and to create a new space inside that. So by adding this piece of furniture inside the space, we were able to connect the building without having to. You could walk here without disturbing people out here. So it's all about logistics, and adding this new classroom or course space, meeting rooms and so forth in the back. Of course, the contrast between the old building and the new is quite tough. And again, using the same space twice by having these really heavy felt or woolen curtains that you could park or you could drag. So you have this kind of inner space here for coffee and so forth, and still being able to do stuff out here that is different. Keeping the old as much as possible, even though there's not much left. And this is more like a detail and nerdy thing, but this acoustic regulation, this is doing the geometric acoustic, which is diffusing the sound, and then you have the acoustic cloth behind here, so you have a double function of this wall, both doing it geometrically and by textile. Then getting a little bit of color into this monochrome space. Since this were lawyers, and their lawyers are always a little bit conservative, we thought that it would be nice for them to kind of wake up once a day and walking through this yellow space. We called it the heart starter. They were not so happy with this yellow color, but the client insisted on it, and what we think of it now is that it's actually working really well, and they're quite happy with it now. Of course, connecting to the back building here. This is another public building. It's a children's culture house. I think we like to call it the first real children's culture house that is newly built in the world. Maybe there's some other we don't know of. But this is a foundation and the municipality in Copenhagen together that collected money for building a house for children that is not a daycare. It's a place where you would go and do art and culture together with professionals. So we were given this really, really small site within another cultural complex, and part of this is really trying to make as much connected space as possible within this really small site. So this is one of the obstacles, you could say, that we like to work with, but the site was this, and you have this 2.5-story house here and a 6-story house on the other side, and how do we actually work with that scale, and how do you connect that? So basically just connecting the two gables and pushing it down according to the daylight that we needed to have in the backyard here, which is quite close by. And then at this time we wanted to use the surface on top as a play area, but it was too expensive, so it was actually given up. And then digging down here so you can have 2 stories in the 2.5-story end, with a cafe and a space for theatre and dance and so forth. And then in the other end, called the mountain, workshops that are all connected visually, but not acoustically. And one big exhibition space, which is this staircase up here, where you can exhibit your work. This is how it looks like today. So the idea was to work with the skin as one skin. The roof and the facade is the same material, and these windows or holes are kind of livable places where you could sit, or you could be in between inside and outside. So the idea is that the children can furnish and decorate and so forth for a while, and then you can change it again. So you can find your own little space within the big space. And of course trying to relate to context in a more abstract way, but still the scale has resemblances to the existing. And yeah, so this is done by the children. You can change the inner lining of these, so they can change them when they want to. The whole programming was done with a group of children, and we tried to kind of find an abstract way of discussing their notion of a house like this. How should it be if they were able to decide? And it was very much about sort of landscape references. It was about the beach, the mountain, and so forth, and very, very much about movement and connection and being able to hide together with your best friend and so forth. So it's kind of a twinkly house, you could say. It has all these little places everywhere, but the connection and the visual connection is always quite far. You could say you can actually stand down here and see all the way through all the spaces up, and you could walk on the side, of course. And you can open and close up the connection between the indoors and outdoor. Here you can see actually you can look all the way up here to the workshops, and this is kind of the common workshop where children and parents can work together. Underneath the stairs there are small places like this, which is kind of an exhibition space and also a library. It's really tiny, actually. So this is, in daily time, it's you can actually climb here, but you could also exhibit in these. So there are different devices to exhibit your work. So you can have exhibitions during the week or whenever you want to. This is the dance space. That is also to be used to other different things, and of course the connection to the other workshops. And for very small children, this is a drum furniture, where you could do different. It sounds differently and so forth. And just a tiny space in connection with the sky. So that's painting on the walls. And another small space. Sport and Culture House in Holbergsgade, which is a rundown area in Copenhagen, on Amager, which is kind of an island, another island outside Copenhagen. This is a really dense area, and it also has quite a lot of social problems. So this was paid by the municipality, and again a foundation that paid half this project. And the idea was to make an open space, and not a sports hall in traditional sense. It was to make a program that was very open, and we thought of it as being almost like a field that is covered, and that is supposed to be available for everybody around and inviting for everybody. So, and this was the site where you have these Copenhagen blocks, as you can see, really dense, and somehow the end was missing of both of these. There's a street here. We were able to build right against these. On the other hand, the daylight situation in here is really not so great. So what we did was to define, of course, the site and also to define the requirements for doing basic sports, which is in Denmark very much about handball fields and badminton and so forth. So there was a basic requirement for that, which is 40 by 20 by 8 meters. And then creating the largest space that we could without destroying the daylight situation for the neighbors and connecting everything. So this is about getting the largest space as possible within the budget and within the regulations of the site. So by doing that, and by doing it in polycarbonate, which is a very inexpensive material, we could get a covered outdoor space almost, which is open for new ideas. You could say you can actually build within it. It's a three-dimensional building site almost that we have created. So when you get more money, you can actually add within this open skin. So here you have the landscape, you could say, and the coverage of steel. And underneath, of course, there's all the situation of changing rooms and showers and so forth. And also there's two spaces in here that is that you can close, and then you can do kind of noisy stuff in here. But otherwise, everything else is open and is more like being outside. Polycarbonate, we used to like that a lot because it's so inexpensive, and it's of course transparent. You can get daylight in, but actually now the energy requirements is too tough, and also we don't think it wears all that well, so we don't use it that much anymore. But the idea is, of course, now you have this big lamp in the street, and you have this kind of inviting, glowing space where everybody is able to attend. It's naturally ventilated with sensors, so you open the windows. The geometry is really great for natural ventilation. You take in the fresh air here, and you take out the heat up here. So it's kind of a low-tech house. There's no ventilation system other than the natural ventilation system, and it's heated by also a very simple matter, by heating boards in the ceiling. By having these windows, you also have the possibility of getting daylight that's not diffused, so you get the contrast between the direct light and the diffused light, which is, I think, very important. Otherwise, you get kind of very uncomfortable within the lighting situation. And this is from within the courtyards, so they actually gained space, you could say, or at least they gained some sky. And inside the sports hall here. So this is in Denmark. We have the situation that you have all these unions demanding space in the sports halls, and this is created to only have 40% union use, and 60% is open to everybody. So you can just come in and do sports without having any kind of appointment or anything, which is I think is very important, because if you are not so resourceful, it's really difficult to kind of attend something that you need to go to every Thursday night or something. So this is more an open situation. It's not a spectator seat. This is not for competitions. It's more for hanging out, you could say, or watching other people do sports. This is a very small project. It's a small culture house in a suburban area outside Copenhagen, and as you can see, it's extremely suburban with all these single-family houses. But also there's a few new areas here from the 60s, and and this is actually from 2000, where you have developed a small forest, and in this forest you cut out a piece, and then you place your development inside here. This is the master plan. We didn't do that, but we actually built a communal housing down here in this, and then we were attending a competition for this very small site to do this culture house. And since the site was so small and there was no program, we discussed very much how to make this house used 24 hours a day. And instead of just having a house where everything is in connection, or you could, you could have a party, or you could do stuff, then you sort of privatize it. We stacked all the different activities that we could imagine, and you could connect them in the back. But you could also use them independently, which means that you can use this space different parties at a time, but you can also connect the whole thing. And this is how it looks like. The forest is out here. It's not really tall enough now, but we created this as also being kind of a tree where you have the possibility of getting a view over suburbia on the top, and you're always visible, so everybody can see if something is going on here. And a very compact program with a climbing wall out here, with a skateboard ramp, and with a basketball field on top, and a common kitchen in the bottom, where you can open up like a kiosk in the summertime, and you can also come here and cook and bring it back home. And then you have an auditorium and a multi-purpose space up here. And the auditorium, very small space. And the connection between multi-purpose and auditorium space, where you can close it up with a sliding wall, so you have connection in the back, and you can use them separately. Cold winter, I think, so that's why we used the light in Denmark can be really, really grey and really dull. So using the yellow purposely to create a little bit of sunshine is something we do quite often. It's kind of a combination of perforated aluminum and open aluminum. So there's a whole sustainability issue here with the natural ventilation and solar screening and so forth. In Denmark, the building code is now so tough, so we don't talk very much about it anymore, because all houses actually have requirements that is lower than the German passive house requirements. So we don't talk about making sustainable houses. That's just what we have to do. So it's not an issue anymore. It's just another way of thinking. I mean, you cannot make totally open houses anymore, and there are things you cannot do. But otherwise, it's all about just doing it. And this is the basketball field on top, viewing all the way to Copenhagen, I think. This project is also a really public project, very small. It's a viewing tower on the harbor of Aarhus, and the competition, which was between 5 Danish architects, was about making a viewing tower. You needed to get up there as a handicapped person also, and down again, of course, and you needed to seat it on a foundation that was only 3 square meters. Which is part of the old foundation for crane on the harbor. So there were only a few requirements, but they were kind of strict also geometrically. So the idea was, instead of just getting there, getting up, having a view, getting down again, it was really important that the whole, the part of the experience was also the movement in the tower. So the idea is that this tower is not just a place to view, but also a place to hang out, a place to maybe also to fish and to jump out. We're not allowed to do that, but people do that actually now. And that the whole movement is part of the experience. Yes. And the idea was also that we could produce this on a shipyard and ship it out there and just put it down onto the foundations, which actually worked pretty well. Renders. Of course, the whole foundation part and the stabilizing of this was really crucial. So we worked with a very fine engineer and did lots of models, which is of course working with parametric design. You can do a lot, but you can also do models and just see if it, is it stable or not. So we did both, and then we perforated the whole thing according also to the engineering requirements. So you put the holes where they actually fit, also physically, you could say. And here it is. So it was produced on a steel work in a factory that was actually used to making oil rigs, and it's all steel, welded and painted and brought on a ship and just lifted down with a crane on this extremely small foundations, and the whole tower is actually in balance. So even though it's very sort of crooked and looks like it's not in balance, but it is. You can see when you move around, it's not just warped in one direction; it's warped in 3 or 4 directions. It's actually really, really popular. When it opened, we were really scared because people were crawling on the outside of the tower. Of course, the holes are kind of inviting to that, and they were jumping out. There were lots of people fishing and so forth, and I think it's been an immense success. But also, we had to close some of the holes because it was actually too dangerous. People would walk out, crawl out of the holes, and crawl on the outside of the whole thing. So I think they still do, but it's on their own risk. And looking back from the entrance. Yeah, it's slow. I think. This is the last project. We actually just started the building site right now. So it's competition we won last year. It's in UNESCO protected area. It's the Wadden Sea. Lots and lots of birds are feeding there before they go from the north to the south. And it's actually really, really beautiful, very sort of flat, open area with lots of water and lots of birds. This center is to exhibit, of course, the UNESCO nature area, and also the story of the bird, you could say, of the birds that are traveling from the north to the south. And there was an existing building there from the 80s, which was actually not very nice and not very well proportioned, but it was laid out as a farm. And the idea was to make an extension to this area, to this center, and to make a more sort of harmonic, you could say, architecture. So what we did, or the main scheme that we did, that we also won with, was to add on the outside of the existing building a new building. So this is the existing building, which is right here, and what we did was to add a new one on top here, and somehow make a more harmonic farmhouse, which is within the topology of the area. And this was also existing, and then we embedded that in a new building. So the scale is kind of getting bigger, but the idea is to use the traditional material of the area, which is this straw that you would harvest in the quite close by, actually, and not just use it on the roof as the traditional ones, but also using it on the facade and work with it in a more abstract way. So it's kind of sculptural treatment to this very simple and very traditional topology. and working, of course, with the straw and the whole construction in a delicate way. And as you can see, it's a totally flat area, and you hardly have any. You have a very sort of large view at the horizon, but you don't have any trees or anything around. And this is kind of a later on. Then we were allowed to the old building here, which is not very beautiful, and it's in plaster. We suggested to clad that in wood, not to do it in straw because it's not the same building, but somehow make it more harmonic. And the old and the new. And this is the entrance area. And the teaching house, or the schoolhouse out here, where you have children coming in groups and get taught, and then they move further out into the wooden sea, and outdoor eating area and so forth. That's it. Thank you very much.
So thanks, Dorte. It would be great to have kindergartens like you have in Copenhagen and Prague.
Thank you.
So do we have any questions in the hall? Maybe we will need light also. Is there any question?
I have just one question, if I can ask. Just a minute. Hello.
Hello.
I really like the straw concept of the building, but I would like to ask how often you have to change the straw, like because it's biological material, and I think that it is going to waste often. So how many times you have to
There's a
change?
40 to 50 year lifetime on this. It's very much about you need to get the water off, so you need to have a 45-degree angle. Otherwise, it won't last. I mean, if it's flatter than that, it will rot very easily. But also the climate out here, which is close to the, it's on the west coast, and the climate is very salty, and the salt will preserve also the material. So it's very much about also not having trees nearby and so forth. So this is the perfect place actually to use this kind of straw. Yeah.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Další dotaz?
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question for the second to last building, the KRUH View Tower. You said that one of the conditions was it should be accessible by handicap. It just didn't seem so in your design.
It is. There's a lift on the side of the staircase, which you go down, and then you come around, you come up on the lift. So, but there's no elevator. But the argument is that if you're a handicapped person, you would like to move in the same way as people walking. So that's why we put a lift instead of an elevator. And the whole concept, of course, couldn't have an elevator. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was very fascinated by your Arne Jacobsen re-architecture kind of concept. Could you say something about this? Because he's a very strong architect, and then you have to do something against it or with it, or the kind of philosophy that you used.
I think he is a very strong architect, and also it's very delicate what he does. So the working with Arne Jacobsen, you have to have a lot of respect, I think, and also not to sort of compete with the detailing, which is extremely delicate. So what we did was to keep very low key when we were in the school. We only changed we had a sliding door between the classrooms, so you can use them together. But in the Arne Jacobsen detailing and material and so forth, and then we thought that it would be important not to change what he did, but to make a supplementary space that was very different from his spaces, and you could use these two spaces in a complementary way instead of in a parallel way, instead of changing, everything to the same. So that's the idea, that you have these two parallel walls and you can use them together.
Dotaz někdo tam okolo náhodou nemá? A někdo jiný?
Tak jo.
Jo.
Thank you. The two questions that I have in mind is, how do you think the whole your career or work as an architect influenced the fact that there's so many wonderful briefs of civic architecture in your portfolio? I mean, what do you think you learned most on doing for, let's say, public investors, be it subsidized housing or whatever of these civic ones? And the second is, would you like to answer or not, which part of kind of process or know-how of your office you can say, and it's not secret? I mean, how when your office was founded or it's growing, did you had to reorganize it many times, or did you find your own kind of method how to do it?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Well, I think what right now we have reorganized the office, and I think it's quite a relief to. I've been the director for all these years, and I think that right now we are reorganizing with the partners, and also with a director, which is taking care of business. And so I'm only a creative director right now, which is a big relief. And I do think that I wish I'd done it before, further on. Of course, you need to get to know your own ways of working and somehow find your feet. But I think architecture has changed so much in the last 10 years, and you need to have somebody who knows more about business and economics and so forth to be able to keep on developing your creative work. You need somebody who can actually also develop the business part of the office. And I think that wasn't the case maybe 10 or 20 years ago. You could be a good architect and have a nice office, and it would work. And I think right now times are getting tougher, and you need to be much more professional on the business part and communication and so forth. So we're doing that now, and I think it's, yeah, I wish I did it before. Yeah. Was that the answer? Yeah.
This was the second one. The first one was on the
on the program, the civic functions you're doing mostly. How do you think it influenced you as an architect? The offices that built themselves on private residential projects.
I think our main interest, or my main interest, is somehow in creating something in relationship to the public, or you could say, but I think the budgets of the public work is always pretty low, and I think that, so what we learned from that is probably to really make priorities to the budget and to try to get the most out of what was there, and also I think getting sharper on what we actually wanted to achieve. So prioritizing public space in front of something else. We would never make nice bathrooms or I mean, it's not that I don't like to do delicate detailing, but it's really expensive. So we would make some very tough priorities, I think, in most of that work, and I think that's pretty good to do. Of course, sometimes it would be nicer to have a larger budget, but it teaches you, how to be economic with your means, and I think that's been important. Right now we do more private buildings. Also, we do a lot of mixed-use buildings where you have a private client and you have a public client, and you somehow need, to make this work with very different interests. And I think we just discussed that earlier today. It's actually really interesting to have these very complicated situations with clients that you need to. We're also doing right now the IKEA a big IKEA in the middle of Copenhagen, and so you have the municipality and you have IKEA and you have other interests, and of course the city interest, and trying to solve that in a way that you could give something back to the city is really interesting, I think. Yeah.
You wanted to also mention the role of the women in architecture.
Yes,
Your-
oh, sorry,
your
I forgot
role.
that. Yes, I forgot. Well, I think we had this discussion earlier on, and I think I think the role of women in architecture is slowly changing right now, sort of globally. I see a lot of women, or not a lot, but I see some really good, really strong offices popping up around the world, in the States and in Europe, which is solely driven by women. But there's not that many, and I think that maybe the scene is changing a little bit now. But there is of course there is some different enemies, you could say, from within, of course, and from the outside to have an office as a woman. I think the main enemy is probably what happens within yourself, and not being able to promote your work and to take credit is something that women are really bad at doing. And in this kind of competitive business, you need to be extremely strong on communication and being able to also to kind of brag about what you do and what you did and what you're going to do tomorrow. And that's not really a woman. It's not really received very well, as you could say. Women are not very charming when they're very aggressive or very sort of outgoing, saying I did this and this and this, and I'm really great, and see what I did. So maybe it's quite important to get used to doing that. I think is part of the thing to actually work on.
Thanks a lot. So do we have any more questions?
Hi. It started to be quite serious discussion, so I would like to go back to the projects that you showed us. But anyway, I mean, it was the very first project that you showed us. It was the kindergarten on the sea. What was very interesting is that there were two very strong concepts fighting each other. One of them was the sculptural quality of the project, and the second one was the public use of the roof of it. The one that won was the sculptural quality, and we know that there are means of solving the second one.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that you have simply, the first one has won against the other. Why is
It
that?
was not in my intention to that should win. I think the municipality or the client decided that they didn't want to take the responsibility of having a public terrace on the roof, which I think was a big mistake in a way, because now you have all children going there with skateboards without any kind of railing, and it's actually really dangerous. I mean, they would go up there at night time and so forth. So, but then, like, of course, if you don't take responsibility, you don't take responsibility, and I think that's what they didn't want to do. They didn't want to take responsibility if something happened. It's a kind of a legal thing.
So it was not your decision?
It was not. It was not. Definitely not my decision. No.
Like protecting your beautiful, nice design?
No.
Thanks.
No, there are ways of. There would be ways of doing that. I mean, of making a railing that would be within the form. No problem. Yeah.
So I do suppose that we are going to have the last question. So we also to say something or ask.
Hello.
Hello.
I would like to ask you more general question. As an architect, what do you feel? What do you think about because Copenhagen in last time really growing and developing? For example, as this MAADorte, the whole location is changing really progressively, So what do you think, like architect, what this could mean for the city in general and for people, and if this direction is right or not, or just like...
I think that's a good question. Also leading up to Tina Søby coming next time, because the municipality of Copenhagen is really, I think, very observant on how to make the city grow from within, because that's the decision that you don't want to have urban sprawl, you don't want to have more suburban areas, so you have to grow Copenhagen from within, and the density is really growing. You could say I think also we've learned a little bit from Ørsted, which is where the scale is so enormous and really not very attractive. You know, they've kind of grown. They have higher houses and bigger blocks and larger spaces, but it doesn't really work as a city. So I think the new developments in Copenhagen are much more focused on making a small scale density, you could say. I mean, you still have much more dense areas. Also, you have more towers and more high-rise. But the idea is that the zone around the building should still be small scale, and you need to break it down. So there's a whole design manual on how to make a new city, and it's all about differences and contrast and so forth. I mean, it might be too much. We'll see in a few years when it starts growing, but it's definitely another way of thinking the city. It's much more about people and street life and so forth, instead of being... When Ørsted was done, it was kind of, I think, the last modernistic urban planning in Copenhagen, where we were so much more about graphics and making a beautiful plan than actually thinking it from kind of street level. Was that a...
Yes,
answer?
thank you.
Yeah, okay.
So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.